I know a lot of people have been waiting for this track to get released, and so have I, as well as What's Good. We made this like a year ago in their house, and as soon as we made it, we were like excited to release it. So it's just been ages, but I'm so happy it's out. A lot of people have heard it already on like loads of different ID pages and SoundCloud and whatnot. It's out now. Go check it out if you haven't checked it out, and I'm over the moon that it's out. It's the first track of an EP that I'm going to be releasing on NCS. So this has been like a year in the making pretty much. As soon as I had made that track with What's Good, I'd said, you know, I want to design an EP for this kind of sound. I've been loving bass house and heavy house music for quite a while. And I wanted to just put it all into one package. So that's what we're doing. We've got the EP coming out after 3 singles, and then we've got 2 more dropping on the EP. And it's all bass house. It's all been so long in the works, but I'm so excited. I hadn't crossed paths with the guys from What's Good, but I was in a trip on Amsterdam and I messaged them saying, look, I'm here. You wanna like meet up and do some music together? They were totally on board. I went down to the house in Utrecht, if that's how I'm pronouncing it right, just south of Amsterdam. And I basically had an idea already in terms of the breakdown and the build-up part. Took it to the flat. They had a flatmate called Stan, so shout out to Stan, because this song was made in his studio and it was mixed there. We worked together, we laid down some drums, like claps and kicks and stuff like that. Bass one-shots, things that we'll cover. I'll show you all of that stuff. But we couldn't come up with a theme, like a melody or anything. So we just decided to just take a break. I don't know why, but at 2 a.m, everyone was getting tired and everyone was falling asleep. And for some reason I had a bunch of energy. I think it's probably because I slept on the whole way there. So when I was traveling on the plane and things, I was just sleeping the whole time. At 2 a.m, I just decided to pick up the project where we'd left off together. And within 20 minutes, I'd come up with a melody, and it was just complete luck. I kind of just dropped it after that and then showed the boys in the morning. They loved it, and Tyne did a few edits. He changed the kick and a few other things as well, just to fit the new vibe that we'd gone with. And that was it. That was it, done. Smoothest track ever, amazing collab. One of the first times I've been in the studio with someone to make something. A lot of the stuff is online, like you send files back and forth. That's still a really good way to collaborate, for sure, and I still do that. And of course, because of like all the lockdowns everywhere, we've got loads of Zoom sessions happening at the moment, so it's just the same stuff really. But when you get in the studio with someone, it's really cool. So first time that I think it had been pretty successful, and we've got the track released now. Maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, we decided to try and get a vocal on it. Me and a friend of mine wrote the lyrics together over a Discord session. That was great. That went smooth again. And then she recorded it and mixed the vocals into the breakdown. And that's it. That's the track done. Last thing I want to say is my previous sample library was really popular, way more popular than I thought it was going to be. And we sold quite a few copies, which I'm really thankful for. It's amazing. I didn't think that would happen. I didn't think it would be so popular, but yeah, it was a great test to do because now I'm confident in releasing more sample libraries. So that being said, I'm releasing the House Party sample library along with my EP, which has got everything in all of the tracks that we have on this EP, all of the kicks, all of the snares, all the claps, all of the bass shots, some of the presets as well from Serum. That's releasing right now on my website, so you can go check that out in the link in the description. But not only is it from tracks in this EP, it's also being used in future tracks, like that one with Connor Ross that's coming out soon. If you want to get that sample library, I'll link it in the description. But by far, it's my best one that I've ever done, because I've done 2 now, but it's better than the first one. And it's also more than twice the size. And I've thrown in a little mastering video for you as well. So if you are stuck with mastering, that's something that I have thrown at the end as a little bonus for you as well. Okay, so we're in the project and I'm a little bit gutted because I actually recorded this before and then I realized I didn't press record. So anyway, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I firstly want to say and apologize for the amount of mess that's on this project. Like usual, it's messy, but this one's incredibly messy. Like, we've got 125 mixes here. All of them have been used out and there was no space for any more. First up though, I want to also explain what's going down here, because we have the breakdown stem, instrumental, and the vocal as well. The reason for this is because when I made this, like I said, I was in Amsterdam, so I had taken my laptop and it wasn't quite as powerful as what I'm using right now. Therefore, I had to do the things in 2 different projects for my CPU. It worked, and we've just got the instrumental stem for the breakdowns, and it leads into the build-up and then the drop project, which is all the way up here, and we'll cover that in a moment. But I'll let you hear the instrumental. There's not too much going on here. It's kind of standard. And before the end of this part, I filtered the bass out. Then we build it up. And then we got the second breakdown, does the same thing. And then, of course, we've got a little bit of a variation in the build-up. It's like a loop that I found on Splice, of course. It's like an acid kind of sound. Then we got the vocal stem, and we'll listen to that individually as well.
You were fine all this time, I was inside out. Put my heart in your hands till it came back round.
So my friend's vocal is incredibly good. She's amazing at writing, recording, and singing, but she's also incredibly good. Her special ability almost is recording harmonies.
Guess my sanity breaks away too easy.
The build-up is actually the main reason there's so many layers in this track. I'll just go through them piece at a time. So we've got a police siren that goes up and down. Let's start adding the drums though. So the first thing we've added is the hi-hat. And then we added an extra loop from the sample library, this one. And then we added the snares. Now, this is silly, and this is not something that you need to do. There's a lot of layers of snares here, and I think some of them even go further down here. So together, they made the sound I wanted. Again, if you can find the right sample, just stick with that one. Some more claps and some brass stabs. And then they pitch up here. So let's keep going. There's a lot more. So we've got 2 more claps just here. Again, too many layers. Then a kick. Really hard to hear that one. But we've also got another kick as well. So that just adds a nice bit of bass. That's in the sample library. Last few things are another clap and a other clap too. Now, once we add all the rising effects, which are all just pretty much samples, you get a really big full sound on the build-up as well. Almost too much, but it's cool. It builds a lot of energy. So these are just the effects. Over the top, for sure. But again, makes it sound good. Last little thing I wanted to explain was this serum respace that goes up. And then towards the second half, it starts building in pitch. So all together, this build-up sounds like this. So yeah, a lot of layers and a lot of stuff going on, but let's look at the drop because that's the main reason I know everyone's here. What I want to go through is how we built up the drop to begin with. So me, personally, I always start with drums anyway, but that's how the guys from What's Good also started this track with me. So let's just start from the kick and build up the drums. So we've got a kick here, and then we started adding claps. So let me just highlight all the claps. Now, the reason I'm not showing you the processing on any of these drums is because there isn't any. There basically isn't any processing. There might be an EQ on some of the claps now and again, but my method for getting the full sound is to choose samples and layer them up. and it's all about sample choice for me. If you're a follower of mine and you watch my other videos, you know how much I do this and how little I process my sounds. But I think it's a really good thing to try and do, because there's a saying we have in the UK, you can't polish a turd. And what that means is you can't polish something up that sounds rubbish. And if you've got a fundamentally bad sample, likelihood is it's going to be hard to make it work. Focus on sample choice if you want to get the sound I'm able to get. So let's add some extra drums. So this is a bit of percussion that pitches down. We've got some extra little claps. And then we've got the hi-hat. So we've got 3 layers. And together as one. We've added another top loop. This is actually from the sample library. It actually adds quite a lot. Last few things are a rim shot. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to keep the kick and the clap on, but I'm actually going to take away the cymbals so it clears some space so you can hear all the different bass one-shots. There's so many of them and I want to explain them all. Okay, so let's start putting some of them on. So here's a vocal sample. And then we have this one. So all of these bass shots are going to one send. So let's just turn that on. And basically on that send is a kickstart on the second preset and 100%. This gives it an extreme sidechain effect. So there's the first one. Here's the second one. You can barely hear that, but the sample actually sounds like this. So here's an extra layer. And another one. And the final one, which is more subby, and this is a serum patch. And finally, we have this kind of fill as well, which is a bunch of different samples. Another one here too, a breath. A few extra sounds like this. And my favorite one at the bottom here from the sample library as well down here. A lot of different one-shots from either my sample library or Splice, and put all together. In the second half of the drop, we've got some extra little layers, extra loop that comes in here. Sounds like this. Some lasers. And some extra final things at the bottom I call energy effects. Basically what they are just constant sounds that keep going. No, an extra one shot here as well. Oh, and also we have this one that I love using. You'll hear it a lot in bass house. So it's just a vocal. Again, in the sample library. That's the drums. There's not much else going on. And like I said before, there's no processing almost at all on these things. But let's look at the thing that everyone's interested in, which is the leads and the basses. So all of these are the automation below them. They're all in one pattern. And this is what it sounds like. So let's look at the leads first. Our first sound is a serum patch. Processing, nothing. Then when we look at the leads, we get this sound. You hear there's a delay on it. That's because when the melody stops playing, I've automated the delay send to come up. So let's look at that right now. Let's go from the start of the melody and watch as this thing follows this. And for that effect, we're using H delay with ping pong and 1/4. This is my favorite delay. I bought it a long time ago and it's one of my most used plugins. But let's look at the individual lead layers now. So our first layer is the main lead. And just for this, I'm going to take the delay off for a moment. So the first lead is very basic looking, basic shapes, square wave and a sine wave. It sounds quite cool. But if we take the oscillator A and B off, you'll hear the noise is actually adding a lot to the sound. So we take that off, put it back on, extra little bit of grit to the sound. Also the filter, the all pass filter, is doing a lot of work to make it sound more unique as well. So you can see that that's a really useful filter for more organic sound. The effects section, we're using the hyperdimension. Anything under 50% on these two dials, and the size below 20% is what I go for pretty much. Distortion, this one's interesting because we use the sine fold. But if you drag this up, it gets very aggressive. Just adds a tiny bit of edge to the sound. Be careful with this sine fold. Chorus, kind of self-explanatory to be honest. Turn the mix down, gives it a bit of width. The compressor is really useful for these sort of sounds, and that's why you use the multiband, which is essentially the OTT in Serum, because they're made by the same plugin manufacturer. So without it, it sounds a little bit more muddy and not quite as bright. So the compressor in Serum is amazing for kind of very heavy EDM sounds. So definitely worth trying. And then finally the EQ, which is just boosting the low mids a little bit. But the sound without processing sounds like this. So the first plugin is Camel Crusher. And yes, this is a custom skin, if you want to call it that. And I made it myself when I was very bored one day. I quite like it. This tube and amount on the compressor are up and the mech is quite low. I don't typically use this because it's very aggressive. These ones are a lot softer. The other two effects on this lead are two EQs. One of them is doing a lot of surgical cutting and the other one's just giving it a little boost on the highs. Let's look at the first one. We're basically cutting a bunch of frequencies that are quite harsh. So this is surgical EQing, and ideally you do it in FabFilter Pro Q3 or Pro Q2. But I kind of like FL Studio's EQ anyway, so I'm not too picky. And then of course the little boost at the end there too. So without processing, still a good sound, just this brings it out a little bit more. Camel Crusher, honestly, my go-to, so start using that more. Let's look at the Valhalla Room, because that's the last thing that's happening on this effects chain. And as you can see down here, there's a little bit of automation. So what this is doing is towards the end of this phrase, the reverb is coming up in mix, as you can see right here. And we take that off. You can hear a little bit of a kind of suck up effect there. It's quite subtle in this song, and it definitely does add something, but most people wouldn't notice it. But for some other bits of music I've done, it's almost an essential effect. So sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. It worked here. Let's look at the next layer. So this one's pretty rubbish, to be honest. By itself, it sounds rubbish, but in context, it adds a little bit of detune to the sound. And that's because we've got two different saw waves. are detuned quite heavily. That's all that's going on here. In terms of processing, same idea with the hyperdimension. A bit of distortion with a tube distortion, a chorus, and then of course the compressor with the multiband on. In terms of processing, it's pretty much standard for me. It's the Camel Crusher, very similar settings to what the other lead was on, and then a bit of an EQ. Now this one cuts a lot of bass out because I wanted to leave room for the actual bass line. Last layer is 3 times OSC, which the only way I use this plugin is for noise, because it's very simple to generate noise, very low CPU. What I do is I turn oscillator 1 onto this noise setting, and I turn down the volume of oscillator 2 and 3. In terms of processing, it's pretty simple. It's just cutting out the lows. Now, if you put them back in, you'll hear why. So that's just playing the same melody and rhythm. It doesn't have a pitch or anything, but it's adding a little bit of noise to the top. Next up, we've got the basses. All right, so we've got 3 layers, and of course it's Serum again. Let's look at the first one. Again, available in the sample library, but this one's so simple, you could make it yourself, to be honest. All we have is a sine wave and a noise. Let's turn the sine wave off. Pretty aggressive noise. Let's turn the noise off and the sine wave on. Just a little bit distorted. If we go to the effects section, we can find the diode 1 distortion type, and then we've turned the drive up a bit. You can see that that adds a lot to the sound. A bit of chorus. Actually, ignore that. That's not even on. And then we've got, of course, the OTT compressor on there as well. So without these effects, it sounds like this. With the effects, really aggressive. In terms of processing, we ended up not using this effector from FL Studios. We used a little radiator, and then we also used a little EQ to cut some of the highs because it was a bit much, and to boost some of the sub. So the first layer sounds like this. Pretty aggressive. All right, second layer. Serum again. This is a more of a future house sound, but it's been pitched down an octave, so it sounds really aggressive. By itself, it's nothing really that special, but it adds a little bit of aggression to the main bass, which is great. So in terms of processing, again, we've got the compressor, the multiband, bit of chorus, bit of distortion on the tube, distortion, and then a bit of EQ to boost the highs up here. And without processing, it sounds like this. So that changes the sound quite a lot. After that, we've got the EQ, boosting the highs and cutting the bass. Kind of what I talked about before. This is a standard setup for me for those kind of bass shots from the dubstep packs and stuff. And then, of course, the Camel Crusher. Last bass layer is actually non-existent. It's not being used, so just ignore that one. But I'll let you know what it did sound like. But it just got in the way of the overall production, so we took it out in the end. So altogether as one, if we lock that one, we can hear what they all sound like. Last thing I want to mention about these is they're all going to the same sidechain send that the bass 1 shots are going. So on that send is the DJM filter. That allows us to control all of them at once and do some transitions towards the end of the drop, where a delay comes up. And then, of course, the kickstart. Let's turn that on. So second half of the drop, all that happens here is the lead layers go up an octave, and then we add this extra layer. It actually sounds really rubbish by itself, but it's just a detuned saw wave that has a little bit of vibrato at the end of it there. And you can actually see in the MIDI that we've done it like that. So it sounds rubbish by itself, but it's got a kind of Arabic vibe to it. If that's the right word to use, I don't know. But yeah, we'll go with that. And then we're at the end of the track. Let's hear it all from the build-up.
Back down, bring it to a halt, you're whack and it's all your fault. Back down, bring it to a halt, you're whack and it's all your fault. Back down, back down, back down, back down. That's how it was and that's how it is.
There we are into the second break. The only thing different between the first and the second break is that layer that we added, which was the splice sample. So yeah, it kind of a copy and paste job, but by the time we'd spent so long in this track and the fact that we'd maxed out all the mixers, it was quite painful to try new ideas. So we just kind of settled for less, if you can even say that with this project. Either way, hopefully you learned something from this pretty large project and you can use it in your own productions. As I said before, the sample library is available on my website. That's magnusdj.com. And make sure you go give What's Good a follow on Spotify and Instagram, because those guys are such nice guys and such amazing artists. It was the best thing to be able to work with them, and I think we made something really special here. So thank you.